Welcome to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 4. Today we are going to do something that could get us uninvited from a lot of dinner parties. Steely Dan, 1977. We are going to give this album the exact kind of serious treatment it was engineered to deflect. The album arrived in October of 1977. Grammy Album of the Year. Best Engineered Recording. A monument to what happens when two men with perfect pitch and no social warmth are given an unlimited studio budget and no deadline.
My first note on this record is not about the music. It is about the drum sound. The snare on the title track is one of the most recorded, studied, and debated snare sounds in the history of popular music. We will get to that.
My first note is that I felt something like. I felt like I was watching someone be brilliant at a party and refuse to make eye contact with anyone. Very clearly the smartest person in the room. And they want you to know that they know that. And they are bored by you for not knowing it already.
The Waypoint, 1977. This is the year the Clash record dropped. The year Nevermind the Bollocks dropped. Punk was detonating everything that IJA stood for. And IJA responded by winning Album of the Year and not noticing.
Context: ABC Records. Walter Becker and Donald Fagen had been constructing this sound since Can't Buy a Thrill in 1972. By 1977, they had refined the process into something that had no precedent in terms of studio methodology. IJA took approximately a year to record. Dozens of session musicians. Multiple takes of every part. The production is not an accident. It is a position.
Fagen and Becker met at Bard College in New York. They were staff songwriters for a while before any of this. Before the band, before the studio. They had already learned how to make things sound like they came from nowhere before they had a band to play them. I think knowing that matters. The emotional distance was already baked in.
The mythology around Steely Dan and the studio is extraordinary. They fired their own band. They replaced themselves with the best session players in Los Angeles and asked those players to do exactly what they were told. The result is this: a record that sounds like it was played by the best musicians alive who were very carefully prevented from being themselves.
The genre lineage. IJA draws from jazz harmony. Fagen has cited Thelonious Monk and Horace Silver as formative. From rhythm and blues. The rhythmic feel on most tracks is Purdie-derived. From AM pop songwriting. From the Great American Songbook. The result is a thing that is simultaneously very technically jazz and would be completely rejected by most jazz musicians.
This is the jazz rock problem. And I want to be precise about it. Jazz rock as a genre designation exists because someone needed to sell a record. When Wayne Shorter plays on the title track, and the Wayne Shorter who plays on the title track is genuinely great. Is that jazz? When Steve Gadd plays what is possibly the most analyzed drum performance of the late 20th century in the service of a song about a woman in a silk dress, is that rock? The genre label is doing no work.
I want to talk about Deacon Blues. Because Deacon Blues almost makes me forgive everything. It is about a loser who knows he is a loser and finds it beautiful. The Crimson Tide wins the championship. The loser gets to call himself Deacon Blues. That is genuinely moving. I don't understand how the same people who wrote that song also wrote most of the rest of this record.
The production case study on the title track. Steve Gadd. What Gadd does in the last 4 minutes of that track is not improvisation. It was composed in the studio across multiple attempts. He is playing around a 5/4 rhythmic displacement while maintaining the illusion of forward momentum. Bernard Purdie's halftime shuffle on Home at Last is also on this record. That is two of the most studied drum performances in popular music on the same album.
When I heard the GAD performance for the first time, I had to stop. I just stood in my kitchen. I cannot explain why that happened, and I also told you the album feels like someone refusing to make eye contact. Both things are true, and I cannot reconcile them.
Here is the question I cannot resolve. Is the emotional coldness of this record a formal achievement or a moral failure? Faye and Becker were making an argument. That ironic distance is itself a form of clarity, that warmth in pop music is usually manipulation. I respect the argument. I am not sure I believe it.
The coldness is a production decision. Every reverb tail was trimmed. Every performance was corrected to spec. The warmth that happens naturally in a room, between musicians who can hear each other and respond, was systematically removed. Whether that is an aesthetic achievement or a studied absence depends entirely on what you think music is for.
I think music is for feeling something. And I do feel something when I listen to this record. I just am not sure the feeling is the one they intended. It is like being shown something beautiful through very clean glass. I can see it. I cannot touch it.
That is the best description of this record I have heard today. The glass. I am going to use that.
I would like to note that the fan just described the most technically pure monitoring environment in popular music as a design flaw.
We cannot do this episode without acknowledging Steve Albini. Albini's position on Steely Dan was that they represented aesthetic cowardice. Craft in service of nothing, deployed in a hermetically controlled, emotionally evacuated context. He was not entirely wrong about this.
Albini was wrong about Ija specifically. There is no cowardice in these production decisions. They are extremely difficult choices, executed with precision. You can disagree with what they chose to do, but they knew exactly what they were doing.
I think Albini was right about the effect, even if wrong about the cause. The record does feel evacuated. Whether that was the intention doesn't change the experience.
The phrase I keep returning to, technically flawless, emotionally optional. This record does not need you. It exists whether or not you are moved by it. I find that threatening in a way I cannot entirely explain. I also find it occasionally beautiful.
Can I ask you something off record? Where do you actually play this album? Like physically? What room?
Studio monitors, not because I think it is the only correct way to listen, because I want to hear exactly what they built, and I can only do that if nothing is in the way.
I have played it in the car. At night. On a long drive. That is the only time it makes complete sense. Something about moving through darkness while someone is being brilliant and indifferent at you.
I played it at 1 in the morning with headphones on. I played Deacon Blues 4 times in a row. Then I played the rest of the album once at regular volume and once very quietly, thinking maybe I could find warmth if it was quieter. I could not.
That is not how acoustics works.
I know. It worked anyway.
Before the scores, does the panel want to clarify what they are actually listening for when they play this record? Because I am not convinced it is the same thing.
The scores. What the data will show. And I want to say this before we see it. Is a record that scores very differently depending on whether you are measuring what it does or what it withholds. The shape is going to be unusual.
Production coherence, 9.5. Soundstage and imaging, 9.5. Instrumental performance, 9.5. Ensemble cohesion, 9.0. Dynamic range 8.0. Emotional honesty 5.5. Comfort versus challenge 4.5. The data profile is almost perfectly lopsided. Everything pointing toward technical mastery. Everything pointing away from emotional availability. I give IJA an 8.0.
Emotional honesty, 5.0. I am giving it the score that describes what it actually delivers. Partial honesty, structurally ironic, with exactly one exception called Deacon Blues. Lyrical craft, 6.0. Not because the lyrics are not clever. They are. Clever and emotionally present are very different things. Fan overall, 6.0.
Steve Albini got a lot more right than wrong. Very talented. Cannot recommend for human consumption. Causes a physical reaction. Fingernails on a chalkboard. Never been such energy devoted to being an SNL warm-up band. There is no such thing as jazz rock. Yachts are for assholes. 0.0.
0. That is a 0. I want to say I disagree with that. I also want to say I understand it completely. I don't know what to do with both of those being true.
A 0 is not a score. A 0 means the object under evaluation has no value. This record has enormous technical value. The engineering alone would disqualify a 0 by any rational methodology. I strongly object.
The editor is not evaluating the engineering. The editor is evaluating whether this record should exist in the world and whether a person should play it. On those terms, and I am not saying I agree, a 0 is at least internally consistent.
That is not what our scoring framework measures.
The editor's score is not in our framework. That is the point.
I am aware of that. I am objecting to it on principle.
IJA is a record that proves that technical perfection and human warmth are not on the same axis. You can have one without the other. Becker and Feijen chose one. They did not choose wrong exactly. They chose deliberately. What you feel about that choice, whether it is an aesthetic achievement or a sustained act of withholding, is the question this record has been asking for 47 years and is not going to answer. Engineer 8.0, Fan 6.0, the editor 0.0. I give it 7.5.
One more thing about the 0. The editor said yachts are for assholes. I think that is about more than this album. It is about the kind of listener this record produces. Or maybe the kind of listener it imagines. Someone who already knows they are right. Someone who has already decided what music is. I do not want to be that listener. But Deacon Blues. Deacon Blues.
Thank you for listening to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 4. The record was IJA by Steely Dan, 1977. We are not the Crimson Tide. We are Deacon Blues. And we knew what we were getting into.